blowing past multiple stop signs at the Yuma Border Patrol checkpoint. The impact of the crash caused a metal support structure to collapse. One of its poles broke through the checkpoint booth's window, seriously injuring the two agents inside. Now, after months of legal maneuvering, the driver, Rogelio Sanchez, accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to one count of attempted aggravated assault in the 2023 incident. As part of the agreement, the 7 original charges of assault and endangerment were dismissed. Under the plea deal, he's facing a reduced sentencing range. While the final decision is up to the court, he faces a minimum of 1.5 years in prison and is required to pay restitution. The Yuma County Attorney's Office declined to comment on the plea agreement, and it remains unclear why Sanchez drove through the checkpoint that night. At the time of the crash, the Arizona Department of Public Safety said alcohol did not appear to be a factor. Sentencing for Rogelio Sanchez is scheduled for September. Now, the checkpoint here has been closed since that crash. Border Patrol officials say there is plans for a new checkpoint in a new location, but no updates on that plan have been provided to us. Reporting live in Yuma, Alexandra Rangel, Arizona's Family.